the controlling class is not interested in having people understand this because, first of all, this leads to the causal factors, the understanding of the causal factors about why humanity is in the current conditions that we're in. Many people will have no answer for that. They don't understand the causal factors.
I'm Alan Watt, and this is Cutting Through the Matrix on the 3rd of March, 2019. And also remember, too, that even with the Hellfire Club, you'll find that Benjamin Franklin belonged to some of the clubs in those days. And these Masonic clubs were not for the average person. They were for Masons, sure, but at that time, Masons were generally people of dignity. They were called gentlemen, or sometimes called gentile men, but gentlemen. And they often had a prostitution brothel attached to as part of it. And you think, well, I guess they're just indulging themselves, eh? But it was more than just that. It was to do with selective women who had what they call quality and character and intellect and health, that they could mate. Again, that was your privilege. You could get mated with one to have an offspring with, out of wedlock, who would be trained then as a form of, many names have been used for, even Aleister Crowley could talk about the magical child, etc. Today, we can read about it in the Foundation's writings, as I mentioned before. They select children. They don't tell you who bred them, but they select children. And they train them to be rulers in a whole bunch of different areas, which govern us all. And we don't elect any of them, because most of our governance today are unelected organizations and this farcical thing called democracy. Anyway, I could get really into depth with all this stuff, but really, you have to, and you got to chuckle too at the nonsense of it all. You know, how we believe, and they get people all round up about democracy. And by God, did they really get round up, don't they? Democracy. And here's the thing too, for those who belong to these organizations, they hated, and still do hate, the general average low-educated working class. They really hate them, despise them with a passion. H.G. Wells said it too. He says, you know, look at the people. He says, the poor, what you do, he says, you can help them. You help them get over their sicknesses and illnesses. And he wasn't just talking about Britain, he's talking about the rest of the world through charities, etc. at that time. And he says you can vaccinate them against diseases and even throw money at them. He says, what did they do? He says, they breed. And folk thought, well, I guess he's talking about Africa, because Africa, they're always throwing money at Africa, and they couldn't see the results from it. They couldn't see it, because most of the money wasn't getting there, obviously, either. But the corruption's rife in a lot of different nations, too. Every nation's got corrupt. The groups that rule you are legitimate because they conquered and slaughtered folk thousands or hundreds of years ago. And through time, they become respectable. Every country is the same. That's how it is, folks. Those who take the chances, they're bold. Knights are bold. They slaughter their people. They do things that you wouldn't do. They take the chances. They're the ones that win, you see. That's how it works. And we're taught that that's somehow, now they're nice and clean and superior hundreds of years later, their offspring. Really? That's how it happens. Every country is the same. Every country. So H.G. Wells and many of his own ilk were really disgusted at the working classes, but he wasn't talking about that. He was talking about folk in Britain. Yeah, he was. The great H.G. Wells, eh? And he talked about a rulership of the air, you know, a Masonic brotherhood of the air, a secret society who would rule through science, the general population, and things to come. So that's really how it's done. And he belonged to all the societies too. and co-founder of the Fabian Society that would achieve its goals for this planned system, it might take them 100 to 200 years, depended, to achieve it. Well, they've done pretty well up to the present time, haven't they? And don't think it was a separate organization from what was called the far right of his day, those who ruled the empire. It's just different branches to serve different functions and to con and use different societies within and populations within this empire. That's all. Hasn't changed. Eugenics, eugenics, eugenics. And here we all are, really the end product of it. And they're even harvesting. And we know this harvesting has been in lots of top magazines and newspapers about the harvesting of children's organs and for sale and different things like that too. We know all this stuff for stem cell research and longevity projects, etc., etc., etc. And that is true too, by the way, that they've always been, I've said it for the last 25 years or more, that there've always been 3 levels of reality existing at the same time in any profession or field of science, including medicine. Basic medicine that's taught in university for GPs is the lowest form of it. There's another level above it that's given to people who've worked for the system tirelessly and got well rewarded for pushing it all, and they'll have longevity. Then there's another level above that too, where they can do amazing things to rejuvenate the body, to fight all kinds of disease, including cancer and infections. So when the working peoples at the bottom get told about a new system to fight this or fight that or even cancer, it's actually obsolete in the second level and third level, or the ones above them. So that's really how it works in the system. And same with knowledge and everything else too. Today, finding the truth in this day of mass communication is almost impossible, because there's so much sensationalism going on everywhere to get hits, as they call it, and click, and clickbait, etc. That's how they think they're successful, by getting lots of clicks and so on, and stirring emotions. And of course, those who rule the world have stacks of massive foundations working tirelessly every day on the internet with all kinds of pretended reasons for existing and for what they do. So it's pretty well impossible now. I hate to say it, but it's true. And I knew this would come a long time ago. Now let's look at this big organization that was based in London. Still is, of course, the Royal Institute for International Affairs, private organization, that anyone who's anybody in history for the last few hundred years belonged to, basically, even before it was called the same. It was called different names before that. Winston Churchill was bamboozled about it. He knew it existed. It was a covert thing. You'd get whispers of it running the British Empire behind the scenes. And he made a speech in Parliament about it. That was disgraceful how, because he wasn't in the loop at the time, of how it was really running the whole affairs of the empire and creating wars for its own gain, etc., its own purpose. Although it would seem from later speeches he was certainly well aware of what it was, and he was part of it with the round table societies and so on. But at different levels, it had an inner party, outer party, and it had foreign branches that tried initially to hide themselves by giving different names to themselves. But it's the same organization for world empire that I'm talking about tonight, to say all these different aspects of it as part of the same system. And the US took over a big part of the active participation of funding it across the planet since just before and after World War II, up to the present time, under the guise of Council on Foreign Relations and another specialized branch called the Trilateral Commission, where the technocrats that do the real signing and drafting up of plans and so on with think tanks and getting them signed without any votes going through, they're the real movers and shakers, including the guys who really manage the central banking system. There's part of it too across the world. So we're run by agencies of which most folk are completely oblivious of. But it's the same organization, very old, with the same agenda, working tirelessly through foundations as they hire, work and retire and recruit and train and retire for generations. They can always achieve their objectives, getting back to what I said earlier. We are short-term thinkers. Foundations are not. They don't have to be. And this is where we are today with it all, too. But it's really so sad. The people for the last 100 years worked and died, and went through often wars and everything, never knowing that this was behind everything that was happening in their lives. And all the topics, even for gossip for the papers, was dished out by them too. And entertainment as well. What kind of entertainment? What's embedded in entertainment? That's how all-encompassing this happens to be. So in the US, they made the Rockefeller family, the movers and shakers, as a big, huge branch for America. And they would go under the guise of philanthropy, naturally. But they would take all over, as they always do, across the planet, resources, number one, for different guises and under different reasons, and so, but always take over resources, always to help the people, of course, but also education as well across the world, standardized education, promote all the agendas for sustainability, etc., to the present day, and finance all the top players and train them, even again from children who will end up prominent in sciences and social sciences and academia, etc., and in politics too. And this is no conspiracy theory, it's a fact. In the US, there's a really good book put out, in fact, about Rockefellers. It's about social control and Rockefellers, and the book is called The Rockefeller Foundation's Molecular Vision of Life: How the Aims of Eugenics, Social Control, and Human Engineering Shaped Molecular Biology and 20th Century Science. A review of Lily E. Kay, that's her name. This is The Molecular Vision of Life at Caltech, Rockefeller Foundation, The Rise of the New Biology. It came out in 1993 by Oxford University Press. It says, in the molecular biology we have inherited from the 20th century merely a product of the scientific method, an inevitable set of conclusions spawned by the cumulative impartial deduction of the theoretical principles from objective observations, or was it molded, shaped and directed by an elite establishment that had aims much broader than the pursuit of science? In her 1993 book, The Molecular Vision of Life, Dr. Lily E. Kay, whom a 2001 MIT News Office obituary referred to as one of the outstanding historians of biology of her generation, argued that the new biology was largely created by the Rockefeller Foundation and its subsidiary program at the California Institute of Technology, Caltech, through a consensus between a scientific elite and a business elite whose broader aims centered on eugenics and the need to create a mechanism of social control and human engineering. The new science did not just evolve by natural selection or randomly distributed disciplinary variants, nor did it ascend solely through the compelling power of its ideas and its leaders. Rather, the rise of the new biology was an expression of the systematic cooperative efforts of America's scientific establishment, scientists and their patrons. That's interesting. See, every scientist is backed heavily by patrons. To direct the study of animate phenomena. Now, animate is everything that moves, including people, right? Along selected paths towards a shared vision of science and society. By the way, this title, this name they give it, Molecular Vision of Life, it was the third version. They already had eugenics before, it didn't go down too well, and another name too, so this is the third one they used on it. It says that the term molecular biology, in fact, was created in 1938 by Warren Weaver, director of the Rockefeller's Natural Sciences Division, to rename for the third time their program, originally known as psychobiology, the aim of which was rationalization of human behavior. Psychobiology, you see. The model Kay uses to describe this historical process was one of the consensus that does not necessarily require the active complicity of all scientists. Now, he's beautiful too, how they can use everybody who are willing. They're not really quite dupes, they're well paid for it. You know, they probably suspect they're dupes in a sense, but they don't care. Most scientists don't care, as long as they get well padded. wallets. Many of them did not share the goals of eugenics, social control, or human engineering. Many of them, even at the elite level, were interested in the pursuit of pure science, even though they were certainly aware of the goals of the business and administrative elites within the Rockefeller Foundation. Scientists and foundation elites needed each other, however, and the end result was that the new biology would not be an open-ended investigation of the riddle of life, but would rather be directed investigation to answer specific questions in ways amenable to the goals of eugenics and social control. And it says at Caltech and the new molecular biology, the Rockefeller Foundation in 1913 poured $25 million of support into this investigative study, you see, between 1932 and 1959, and ended up with Nobel Prizes, etc. I think they said there was 18 Nobel Prizes to do with eugenics and manipulation of humans and so on, and 17 of them were from the Rockefeller Foundation themselves and funded by them. So they also direct, you understand, you can direct where science is going to go, including how to create infertility in people if you need be. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different areas if you're directing the sciences to do with social policies, eh? Anyway, it says World War I ushered in a new political and economic ideology of cooperation that departed from 19th century individualism and stressed interdisciplinary projects, team players, and coordinating managers. The foundation stepped in during this organization of science and played a critical role in shaping it. They went into agriculture, a whole bunch of biological studies and so on. Food. How do you manipulate people, folks? It's all in here. It's in here too. And it also mentions the founding fathers of molecular biology. These include Thomas Hunt Morgan, Max Delbruck, George Beadle, and Linus Pauling. James D. Watson, who with Francis Crick discovered the structure of DNA at Oxford, and they were a disciple of Delbruck. His investigations with Crick were largely based on Pauling's paradigm of molecular structures, and he later joined Caltech. So they talk about the 17 scientists that out of the 18 that got Nobel Prizes for research into this area, and goes on and on. But it's really fascinating to talk about the whole point was to do with social control. Social control, folks. Most of which would be completely a mystery to those that were being controlled. They'd never figure out their whole reality pretty well was shaped for them. Everything they thought about, even their topics of conversation. They have no idea. To the present day, hasn't changed. It's everything, isn't it? And it said here that they could train the whole world, basically. That was a part of it. It was to train the whole world into this new system. It says John B. Watson wrote his Behaviorist Manifesto in 1913 as well, in which he promoted a new psychology whose inherited goal is the prediction and control of behavior. And this goes on and on and on, and how they could train out and maybe even breed out different traits which are undesirable in human nature, and put other ones that we're really into the fields of genetics. Isn't just purely psychological indoctrination, although it's a big part of it too, but it's everything else as well. How you can create whole fads, and you can get, it's true enough which other members of this organization they knew about, like Bertrand Russell. They knew there's nothing you cannot do if you have total control of what becomes the reality of the general public. The complete reality, you understand? If everything you look at has been designed for you to look at, if every question it's going to lead you to questions, so every question that'll appear in your mind to do with is from what they've given you already, to make you run circles and circles and circles and pre-planned answers and pre-planned questions, and endlessly. You understand what I'm saying here? This is way beyond just the realms of sci-fi. Because to hold on to your sanity, as I mentioned before, is a very difficult thing. And I said that when 9/11 happened, because I knew this whole agenda was going to unravel very quickly and be implemented. And the whole war system and the total observation of every individual on the planet was all part of it too. War was the excuse. The necessity, that word again, necessity. But I'll put this up anyway. It's a good article to read. This is a review of the book. You don't have to read all the stuff yourselves if you don't want to, but you can certainly read the reviews of it, because most of the stuff is real nice to read the condensed versions, because there's so much to read in this day and age. As I say, circles within circles within circles, and questions within questions within questions, all planned for you to spend your life trying to do. The people involved can't read all this stuff themselves. It's too much. They know this. Also, when they put up Peter Hitchens on ID cards, he says ID cards are great if you want to spit on liberty and be a serf. And he goes into this push in Britain. It was a great test bed for all this stuff is Britain, as they come out again last year and try to push for the ID cards for everybody under the guise of mass migration coming. There could be all kinds of criminals, blah, blah, blah. So let's get everybody ID'd with cards and so on and so on. But you can't, as he knows, because he knows history, and he knows you can't go this route. And he also knows that there's other reasons for governments wanting to do it on everybody. Come on, folks. You know all. The same governments that wanted the wars, the same governments that knew mass migration would follow from the countries because it was planned that way. It all comes together at national borders at the same time. You can't get a world system of a new world culture created unless you eliminate nations. Simple. Oh, they're doing it. What do you mean they never do it? Of course they're doing it. William Pitt the Younger, and he also mentioned, he's a British politician in the late 18th century, early 19th centuries too. So he was Prime Minister for a while too. And he talked about it as well, about basically safety for security and all that kind of stuff too. And necessity. He mentions how necessity, like Peter Hitchens and others too, and I've said it too, they always use the term necessity for taking your rights away. They say, well, we'll have to do it to keep you safe. Or we'll have to ID you to keep you safe. Or we'll have to have cameras everywhere to keep you safe. Well, how come worse and worse things happen all the time? And it's getting worse, not better, when it comes to safety. Because safety has got nothing to do with it, is it? Whereas Pitt too talks about it too. He says it's the cry of every tyrant. Every tyrant is safety. Plato said it. Everybody said it. I think Milton even said it too. But no, you can't have any safety. He said too, and with necessity the tyrant's plea. Excuse his devilish deeds. That was Milton, of course, Paradise Lost. But that was pretty well said by the same thing and by Pitt himself. He said it's the argument of tyrants and the creed of slaves. Same thing too. Well, you can't go on like this, folks. Give up all your rights. You can't burn fuel and fossil fuel and stuff. Oh, you can't drive car. Oh no, Agenda 21 for 21st century. But God has saved the world. It's necessity. Total control, remember. Total control of every individual has always been the agenda of this secretive but very huge society in the world. Another part of it too is bring down the populations. Sterilization. We've had all the talks out by different professors in different parts of the world say, oh yeah, older folks should just take the pill and kill themselves, and let younger folk have jobs. By these cushy nothings that have never worked a day in their lives telling us this. You think they're all just spontaneous, coming out by themselves? Of course they're not. Getting paid to do it. And also too, war on superbugs. I've read this article. This is I repeat the same things because there's more to it than meets the eye. There's a good reason and there's a real reason. War on superbugs is putting elderly people at risk of dying with sepsis because general practitioners are under too much pressure to stop doling out antibiotics. Now, what they don't mention in this article is the nudge units, the behavioral insights teams that every country employs now to brainwash us all. It's all through the internet. They're rushed into using every country. I read articles months ago where Britain, the British government, pays them to try to convince doctors and prompts them not to give out antibiotics to the elderly now, or even children. Elderly and children, reduced population, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, Here's the thing too. It says here that revealed elderly people are regularly being denied antibiotics for infections. This is Britain. This is the agenda, folks. I hope you wake up to this and demand you get what you need. You'd better, or you're dead. This is deliberate. It's not a mistake. It's not some vague opinion that they're trying to push upon. No, this is their agenda. So it says, National Health Service offers health boards payments if they slash their prescription rates. You know, if they stop prescribing so much, they get them bonuses. A study suggests that that's pressure may be putting vulnerable people at risk. Of course it is. That's the agenda, isn't it? So it says the National Health Service offers local health boards additional payments if they bring down their prescription rates and antibiotics, and doctors are in turn pressured to give drugs to fewer patients. Well, you better demand your rights, folks, because you're getting killed off here. I hope you understand. This is not just in Britain. I've seen articles in Canada too, and they'll be pushing it on the same people. So when you see your smiling doctor, folks, who you're trained to worship, unfortunately, you better maybe start to put on a grim face and a grimace and maybe a bit of anger and say, hey, I really demand my rights here. And demand that you get your proper antibiotics and the proper length of time. Another con of it is everybody in the medical profession knows this. Everybody knows it. And they used to tell every patient too when they prescribed it. They would give you about 7 days, sometimes to 10 days antibiotics. And they would tell me, you finished that whole course. Don't ever, even if you feel better, keep it to the very end to make sure that particular bacterium that's destroying you is killed off. That was the purpose of it. If you had a few and you felt better halfway through the course, you see, you'll find that bacterium is not quite, there's a few left there and they'll rebound. And now they might be resistant by the time it hits you again and you notice it. And if it's resistant again to the antibiotic, then you need a different antibiotic to kill it off. They know all this. This is standard, old stuff. So if they're giving you a fewer days course by prescription, it's the same thing as you not taking a whole course. You understand what I'm saying? Legally, it might cover their asses, and they know this. They know this, folks. That's the reason for it. But it's not going to kill off the infection. So they're saying in Britain here, in this article, patients sometimes have to go back to try to get more pills because it isn't killed off yet. Well, by that time it'd be too late. It says it here in the article. It says general practitioners have been repeatedly told they run the risk of creating a public health catastrophe by doling out too many drugs. And at one point in 2015, they were even warned they could be struck off for overprescribing. I guess I can prescribe you marijuana now, though, eh? At least you can die, I guess, in some happy haze. I hope you're understanding what I'm saying here. I really do. It's not my opinion, folks. This is just fact. It says the findings suggest that older adults, especially men aged over 85, should start taking antibiotics as soon as possible after diagnosis to prevent serious complications. It reveals elderly people are regularly being denied antibiotics for infections, raising their chance of sepsis. I mean, eightfold, and doubling the risk of death. Well, start the lawsuits, folks. You better start lawsuits, because if you don't, they go through the motions of giving you too few pills to do any good to you. That's the purpose of it. It'll depend who you are, of course, in this so-called classless society. Believe you me, those who are important won't go through any arguing to get what they need. And also part of it too, again, the war, it's all to do with necessity. If they can't get a war on this and a war on that, well, it's a war on humanity. Man's causing death to the planet. Oh my goodness, eh? The climate change, Paris Climate Change Agreement, everything you need to know. Put that back up again for those who don't quite get it yet, what's about. And those who've been trained for the positions and promoted to the top, who, as you know too, they don't have to be a genius, they're far, far from that, in fact. I'm surprised they scraped through some of them, but it says Ocasio-Cortez poses legitimate question, is it okay to still have children? Do you think this is all out of her own mind, folks, or what I've been talking about here? They train them for years and present them to these characters. They get well paid for it all too, well paid. Doors just open. There's lots of them out there in every country. As I've said before, this is not conspiracy theory. It's fact, folks. Liberal Party study claims household energy bills could soar by hundreds of dollars. Again, energy bills, energy. Under Labour's plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This is Australia. Same as every other country, though. Because isn't it strange that all pass the same rules at the same time? And you got less money to buy necessities like food, or good food, which is important food. The really important stuff, like protein. And again, eugenics. Chinese government may have funded disgraced scientist He Jiankui to create the world's first gene-edited babies, report claims. Old stuff. But this is how it is. And this is from the Mail Online, Daily Mail. And it says documents show grants were issued by 3 government institutions in China. Same as every other country, of course. It's not clear whether institutions knew how their grants would be used. Ha, ha, ha. That's the same as saying that the doctors didn't know if half the prescribed dose of antibiotics would do any good. Ha, ha, ha. Scientists modified the DNA of twins to make them resistant to infections with HIV. That's the excuse that they gave for it. I'm sure every country's done the same experimentation, or experiments elsewhere in laboratories you don't even know exist. But of course, they've had lots of articles over many years about gene editing and the creation of new human beings. Of course they have. You know, in the 70s, they actually put human genes into pigs, and the American Department of Agriculture and Livestock, or whatever they call it, was involved in it too, by the way. And after the experiment, where they put them into these particular pigs that they bred, they released the pigs into and the rest of the pigs. So human genes were, after the experiment was over, they put it in, and they ended up going through the population of pigs in America. Human genes. It's like turning us on into cannibals. The things we don't know would terrify us. It's bad enough. We get terrified by the few things we are. And there's hundreds of things we know that terrify us, really. That's why most folk don't want to hear about them. Really, that's the reason. You would collapse if you looked at it all. You would. Yeah, it's quite amazing. And Facebook actively suppressing posts from conservative media sources, whistleblower claims. And then you have... Maybe I'll do another part next week on this, because really, there's just too much to put out there. Most folk don't want to hear it. Most folk think I don't sound distressed enough when I mention these things. But if you get distressed, you're either faking it for a different reason, or you're not fit for it, because you have to be fit enough to understand the truth. You have to fortify yourself to understand it. And when you've known it pretty well most of your life, what's going on, because you only from the books that you read, not the ultra secret stuff that's not published, obviously, but what is published is phenomenally copious, as I say, and that's bad enough. But I've always found that whatever they publish about what they're going to do, it's called different names, like the socialist policy or the futurist societies programs, or the staggering amount of articles put out by universities and socialism and socialist policies and etc., etc. Well, you'll find that they will always, no matter how long it takes, achieve their goals. You find that all the top capitalists are on board with this, without exception as far as I can see. Which leads you to a different whole thing to get, are the top capitalists all part of the same club? And is that how they became the top capitalists? Because they promote their own into being that? Well, actually that is true. I really don't believe that the big figures they put forward to you, like child geniuses that end up owning big parts of the internet, are what they say. I don't think it's that at all. I think they're all fronts. Well-paid fronts. Incredibly well-paid fronts. But fronts not. You know, the CIA has stacks and stacks of legitimate big corporations that produce real things. So does Britain, and MI6 and so on. And various crown corporations, as they call them. But don't believe... Because, see, now's the time, these people who turn to be philanthropists from being geniuses, supposedly, It's strange how they're all on board with the same agendas as philanthropists, depopulation, and a whole bunch of other things. It's always the same things, isn't it? Isn't that rather odd? Why would you get the same darn thing from all these supposedly different individual people? There's only one system here, folks, and it doesn't stand any competition. It really doesn't. Won't tolerate it. Never did. And that's why I can do what I'm doing without breaking up apart, because you've seen the cons that are out there. You've seen the fakes that come out that just grab information and destroy credibility for other people by acting farcically, or even getting laws changed to stop people even putting out good information. I've said before, they give you your leaders. They do. And how come you've been trained into believing you can't think and speak for yourselves? I wish everybody could get that and they'd start to work on it. Why do you need people to say, I feel your pain and speak for you? Why? Who trained you into this behavior of conformity, standardization, the trained society? You better start thinking about it. But we really have reached a crucial time. You have seen that since 2001, you've seen this massive rampage of the unfolding of the whole agenda at breakneck speed, where everything is to be made anew, all society, all definitions, all realities, in fact, and you're living through it, even with the force of law, where you're being told what to say, what to call things that you see, and how evil you are if you won't follow it and go along with it. And you can't see how many fingers that O'Brien is holding up. Think about it. For myself, Alan Watt, from a still very cold Northern Ontario, Canada, it's good night. May your God or your gods go with you.